Okay, so again, the welcome again, right? Ner Avram and the Parshas Shir, Avodas, the Parsha, to try and focus as we do on one small thing and see what it has to teach us about Avodah. Okay, so we're going to go very briefly into Rashi's explanation of what happened there with Yaakov Avinu. Where was he traveling? Where was the ladder? Where did he go to sleep? Without going into all the details, because we want to focus really on just one aspect of it. So it says that Yaakov Avinu, right, went out of Beersheba. He was heading to Charan, and then, right, Vayifga ba'mokom, and he hit the place, okay, which is a very general way of describing a location. Vayifga is a very strange word to use for coming to a place. Okay, so Rashi brings down that this refers to Har HaMoriah, right? Har HaMoriah, Har HaBayis, because it's referred to in other places as HaMokom. Okay, so when you have something that's referred to in two different places, even more, so that's how we know that it's HaMokom. Okay, so then, but how did he get there? He wasn't there, he was in Hebron. So now it tells us the story of what happened. It says he came, right? First of all, I'll just tell you a very cute story about the sleeping. It says that when he came there, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he fell asleep, right? He went to sleep that night. They said he hadn't slept before all the years he was in that mysterious yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever. So it says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Tzadik zeh bo lebeis meloini v'yipoter b'loilino. Right, he said this.
Downstairs.
He said the tzaddik came to my Beit Malon, right, meaning my guest house, so to speak, and he's going to go without sleeping. Okay, he slept there. So the story is there was a dynasty of rebbes in Hungary called the Dej. Dej still exists to this day. It was a town in Hungary, the Dezherov, and the first one, the Mar Yechezkel. They were big Talmidei Chacham. They're Rabbanim of cities also. So the young son of one of these rebbes had gone to another town in Hungary to learn from the Yismach Moshe. Yismach Moshe was the Rebbe of Il, they call it. The whole Satmar and other dynasties came out from there. So he was a yeshiva bacher. He was there learning with the Rav, and he wanted to get himself something to eat. So there was like a fruit stand, a fruit and vegetable stand. So he went to get a melon. And he was like looking at the melons, and he didn't like them. He was about to walk away. So the girl who was like, I guess at the cash register there, or working, it was a family business, she said, Tzadik zeh bo lebeis meloni v'yipoter b'li melona. Right? She said, right, did this tzaddik come to the house of my melons and he's going to go without a melon? Right? So he thought this was like so clever. Like he just had to see who said that. Okay, now him being a Hasidic Bacher and a Rebbe Einikol, he was terribly broken. Because here he'd always been so careful with his eyes, and here because of this clever comment, he took a look at this girl because he wanted to know who came up with that. It was so good. So he was broken, so he went to the Yismach Moshe, and he said, I don't know what to do. So Yismach Moshe said, it's very simple. Right? It says, Asur la'adam l'kadesh isha ad shirena. Right? You're not allowed to marry a woman until you've seen her. He said, so you have to get married, so you were going to look at a girl no matter what. So you've looked at this one, so marry her. Right? So he said, okay, his parents heard about this and they weren't so thrilled. They said, wait a second, some girl works in the fruit store and you're making, the Rebbe said, don't worry, it's going to be good. And so it was. So that's just on that phrase, a very clever story. Okay, so now the ikar of what we're looking at is this mistake, so to speak, that Yaakov made. It says, K'sha'avar Yaakov al Beis HaMikdash madua lo ikvo shom. Yaakov already passed by Har HaMoriah on his way. Right? He's already on the way to Charan. And he passed by the place where the Beis HaMikdash would be, so to speak. Why is it Hashem didn't do something to get his attention there, to stop him there? So they say, Iu lo yoiv libe lispal b'mokom shispalu avoisov min hashamayim yakvu. Right? If he didn't pay attention to see this is the place where Avram and Yitzchak davened, maybe he should stop there and daven also. So what, Min HaShamayim, they're supposed to stop him? Right? He didn't do it. Iyu ad Charan ozal. He went until Charan. But now, Kimota l'Charan, when he came to Charan, Amar, he said, Efsha shavarti al makom shispallu avoisai v'lo ispalalti bo. Maybe I passed the place where my forefathers davened, and I didn't daven there. Yoiv daitil meheder. So he thought, oh, I better go back. I better retrace my steps. V'chazar ad Beisel, he got to Beitel, v'koftza lo ha'aretz. And then there was this kfitzas ha'aretz, and the Har Moriah came to where he was. That's the Vayifga b'mokom. Okay, this is what's described here, this miraculous movement of the mountain to Yaakov, because he somehow missed it, and he wanted to go back, and Hashem helped him out and brought the mountain to him. Okay, so there are a few questions on this. I'm going to bring the questions that are brought to the Sefer Arugas Habosem. He was also a Rav in Hungary, Czechoslovakia, the Rav of Chust. And he asks, first of all, he says, how can it be that Yaakov missed it? Right? If I want to paraphrase him, right, the Hasidic stories that I read, every minor league Rebbe walks by a house and he knows, that somebody did a great mitzvah in there, or he knew that once the Baal Shem Tov slept there. And here we're talking about Yaakov Avinu, right, who's just been in such an environment of Kedusha. And here he's passing the place, not only the place of the Beis HaMikdash, the place where Avram and Yitzchak davened, and whoops, he missed it. How could that be? Number two, why would Hashem make a miracle when he wants to go back? Okay, you missed it, right? And you see, right, in Rashi, there's a bit of criticism toward Yaakov Avinu there. Why didn't you stop him there? What, he didn't notice the place that his forefathers davened? He didn't daven there? I'm supposed to stop him? But now, when he decides he wants to go back, suddenly, miracle time. And Har Moriah moves towards him, Vayifka b'mokom. He said, what would be so bad if Yaakov had to walk back a bit? Why? Why? A miracle is not done b'chdi. It's not done for nothing.
We reverse cases of error.
Right. So he says here, now the answer again is based on this principle we spoke about before, the Maaseh Avos Siman Labonim. That all the actions that the Avos do are preparing the way for all their descendants, even up to us. So he says, he jumps now to applying it to a very interesting thing that I think many of us, I certainly can relate to. He says, we have special days like Yom Noraim. There's Rosh Hashanah, and there's Aser Simei Tshuva, and there's Yom Kippur, and then there's the Simcha of Sukkot, right? And it leads all the way up to Shana Rabbah and Simchas Torah. And a person knows that that's where you're supposed to fill up your ruchni stick of batteries for the whole year. That's what they tell you in all the drushes, right? And these are special times, and you have to take advantage of this time. It's going to affect your whole year, etc. Okay, and the problem is, right, he says, Hashem looked to the future, Ad Sof Kol Adoros, and he saw that there would be a Dor Acharon, Dor Oni Ve'Evyon. There would be a later generation that is very impoverished, like spiritually. Shebo Yagiu Hayom Makdoshim Ha'elu Ve'ein Som Al Lev Lisar B'Yisoros Amitis. It's Rosh Hashanah. He's there, he does it, he shuckles, he hears the shofar, he eats his apple and honey, but nothing really happened inside. He didn't wake up. He didn't take advantage. Right? All the way till it's the end of Simchas Torah, and he looks back and he says, how could I be that I missed the whole season? The whole thing, the Rosh Hashanah Kippur. I did the technicals, but I didn't really change. I didn't really do anything, right? And he feels so bad. And he thinks, okay, what's done is done. You can't turn the clock back. He says, guess what? You can. Maaseh Avos Siman Labonim. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu caused Yaakov Avinu to pass by the Beis HaMikdash place, the place where Avram and Yitzchak davened, and to not notice it, to feel nothing. He was going through, he was acting out, so to speak, as future children who would go through times of Kedusha and feel nothing. You miss it. He says, and then he says, but I want to go back there. I wish I could go back there and daven, and suddenly Hashem brings the mountain to him. He says, what that accomplished is that guess what? If you did miss such an opportunity, it's possible to think about them and to go back there, and Hashem lets you connect to the lights of those Yomim Tovim, of those special times, even after they've passed. Now, again, a person might say, okay, so what do I need Yontif for if I can connect with it every time? This is not an easy thing to do. When it's Yontif, you're there. It's so easy to connect to relatively. But because, right, and he explains this, he says you got to realize that the light that comes into the world on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, it's a spiritual light, right, that shines into our world from the highest sources. It's not really bound by time and place. So therefore, what's behind it all is the Torah. So through the Torah, which is above time and space, you can connect to all those places if you want to, if you really want to go there and to be there. Now, I was discussing this with a friend, the Talmud Chacham, and I said, I think it could also be expanded, not just to Yom Tovim, but to life events. Okay? There are life events, whatever. A couple of my kids have got married, and I've been very distracted at the wedding. I wanted to really think about good things at the chuppah, but, something went on. Nobody gave somebody the things to say the announcements, and it was getting close to Shkia, and the people are worried, what are you going to write in the Ksuvim? Whatever. Next thing I know, they're singing Oji Shema, and I came out and missed the whole thing. And it can happen with a bris, it can happen with a bar mitzvah, it can happen with all sorts of things. But again, these are ruchnius dika events. So therefore, in the world of ruchnius, you can still connect to them, and not only to draw from them, but you can still, so to speak, put into them. You can still be there again and connect to them in ways that you weren't able to before. Now, here, the Sefer that brought down the Arugas Habosem, he says, is really based on a principle the Baal Shem Tov would say a lot, is that you really are where you think, right? In other words, if you're sitting here in Shari Chesed, but you're really thinking about, being on the beach of the Kinneret in Tiberia, if that's where your mind is, that's where you really are. And Rav Yosef Engel, right, one of the great Gaonim, brought a proof to this from Halacha, right? There's a Mishnah that says in Eruvin, that a person, he's planning to take Shabbos in, to be Konesh Shvisa, what's called, by the root of a certain tree, by the trunk of a certain tree that he knows. And halachically, what that means is that tree would then be the center of his Tchum Shabbos, his 2,000 Amma radius that he can walk in on Shabbos. Now, if he's walking and he hasn't yet got to the tree, but he thinks to himself, I know the tree, that's where I want to be, that's where I'm taking in my Shabbos, that becomes his place for Shabbos. That becomes his epicenter. As long as it was within the 2,000 Amas, so then he's there. Okay, so that shows this idea that a person can do and overcome. Please.
As long as he was within 2,000 Amas of the tree,
that
becomes the center?
Yeah, even though his body is not in the center there. Okay, so this is one example of what's going on here with Yaakov, and it's a powerful thing. The idea, now again, we do understand this. We understand that a person who does tshuva me'ava, even something he did b'mezid in the past, can be transformed into a zchus. Right? So here the idea is also, this is a form of tshuva, even on positive things, to want to return to positive things, to want to connect to positive things, to know that that's possible, okay? To know that time for us is not locked and sealed in that way. Our hishtokus, our desire to connect to something, to draw to something, and through the Torah, right? It can be even through learning the things. There were some tzaddikim, when they would learn a Masechta and they're learning Psachim, they would start like singing Pesach songs, because they felt through the Torah's halachas of Pesach, I'm there. We do find that certainly with Karbonos. It says that when you learn the Karbonos, right, and the Shalma Parim Svaseinu, right, that what we say about the Karbonos is as if we're bringing them. Okay, so a person will say then, all right, so why do we need special times? Obviously, it is very different when it's there. When you're in the Yontiv, you're surrounded by the Yontiv, it's all there. Here, you have to create a connection, you have to reach. But Yaakov Avinu, with this, he opened it up for us to the extent that if you want it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring it to you. Okay, so that is in terms of time. Now, Rabbi Yissachar Dova Belz, right, one of the previous Belzer Rebbes, so he spoke about this in terms of place.
That's, as far as time,
yeah,
that was spatial.
Oh, right, you're right. In other words, his application, the Arugas application is time. The original was space, and now we'll bring a spatial application as well. Okay, so Yaakov Avinu said, Ein ze ki im beis Elokim v'zeh shara shamayim. I'll just share a beautiful pshat with it from the Sfas Emes on this Ein ze. He says you have to realize the place that Yaakov was standing, if we would have looked at it from the Google satellite, you would have seen rocks and dirt, maybe some sheep grazing, right? This place which is beis Elokim and zeh shara shamayim. So he said, Yaakov Avinu looked at it, he said, Ein ze. It's not like it seems on the outside. He was able to connect to what it really is on the inside, right? Which is an important skill always for all of us, right? Whether it's how we look at another Jew or how we look at Eretz Yisrael, how we look at all sorts of things. To know, even if it doesn't seem that way in the Exodus. So he said like this. He says, Rashi says, what does it mean this is Shara Shamayim? This is the gate of heaven. He said it's a Mokom Tefillah. This is the place of davening. Because the Beis HaMikdash Shel Mala is mechuvan keneged Beis HaMikdash Shel Mata. Okay, there's a concept of the higher Beis HaMikdash, right? It says that when Titus was arrogant and he thought that he burnt the Beis HaMikdash, he was told, no, kamcha techina katachant, you ground flour that was already ground. Ba'yisarv sarafta, you burnt the house that was already burnt. Meaning when Am Yisrael lost the Chust to have the Shechina among them with the Beis HaMikdash, so that disappeared. Then he was able to burn the shell. But disappeared doesn't mean that it's gone entirely. Just like the neshama of a person, when it leaves the body, still exists, the Beis HaMikdash Shel Mala is always there. Right? Building a Beis HaMikdash Shel Mata was a place in which you could have that closeness and connect with the Beis HaMikdash Shel Mala. Right? It's a whole theological question, the question of how can there be a holy place? Right? Uncle Moshe taught us that Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is really everywhere. Okay? That is a very authoritative source. So Hashem is omnipresent, what you call. That means Hashem's in Kansas City, just like He's in Yerushalayim, just like He's in South Dakota, right? He's everywhere. So how can you say there's something different about a shul, or Eretz Yisrael, or Harabayas, or the Beis HaMikdash? When les asar ponimine, there's no place where Hashem isn't. Right? Somebody told me that one of the sects that broke off from Christianity, I don't know if it was the Quakers or the Shakers or one of them, that was part of their argument, that they don't call their place a church, they call it a meeting house. They felt that it's heretical to say that any space is somehow different in terms of its holiness, so to speak. So the answer I heard is that it's just like right now we're sitting in a room and there are all sorts of radio transmissions going through here. Why aren't we hearing them? Because we don't have a receiver on, right? And a receiver, the better receiver it is, or when it's located better, it receives better. Okay, so the idea of a holy place is a place where you get a better connection, right? Where you get all the bars, so to speak. It's easier to connect. So that's the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, now Rashi says that the Har Moriah, the place of the Beis HaMikdash, moved from its regular place and came to meet Yaakov Avinu there. So Yaakov Avinu brought Kedusha to be in another place, not in its usual place. And therefore he said, in the times of Golus, when the Beis HaMikdash will not be in its place, Bnei Yisrael will be able to bring the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash to every place they're standing, by standing and davening as they should be, and serving Hashem as they should be. You can bring the Kedushas Beis HaMikdash to each place where you are. Again, this is not implying that you can stay in Borough Park and who needs the Beis HaMikdash, right? You do this. Obviously not. There's a big difference to being able to physically, tangibly be in the Beis HaMikdash. The Torah gave us so many mitzvahs where you must be there physically. Doesn't matter what your kavanas are. But nonetheless, the fact that we turn towards Yerushalayim when we daven, or if you're in Yerushalayim, you turn towards Harabayas, and the Mishnah Berurah says you're really supposed to be thinking that you're standing there, mul the Kodesh HaKadoshim, right? So that thought isn't just an imagination. That thought is imaging what you're actually accomplishing when you daven. That's what's supposed to be there. The very idea of coming close to the presence of Hashem, those 3 steps back we take and the 3 steps forward. Someone who's never been to a shul, that looks so strange, right? People go step back, step forward. And what we're doing is we're expressing the idea that I am now coming before Hashem, lifnei Hashem. That is status which is there. Reb Chaim Soloveitchik said that's one of the kavanas of tefillah, the overriding kavanah of tefillah is to be omid lifnei hamokom, that you're standing before Hashem. That's a very hard kavanah to have, and to make that real. So Yaakov Avinu was doing that for people that wouldn't be able to be in the Beis Hamikdash itself. Okay, therefore, for a simon for what he accomplished for us, the Hara Moriah came to him, and came to where Yaakov Avinu was. And he made the preparation for that tefillah in the place where the other Avos davened, right? And therefore he was able to bring the Kedushas Beis Hamikdash to the place where a person davens. Okay, he pointed out that Yitzchak Avinu, right, Avram Avinu got Kedusha in that place. He said, Behar Hashem Yero'eh. That's Hara Moriah. Yitzchak Avinu got Kedusha there. It says, VaYetzei Yitzchak lasuach basodeh. He davened there. The Sodeh, the field there, refers to the Beis HaMikdash. Yaakov got Kedusha shelo bimkoma, not in that place, because he was preparing us for that Golus. V'chol makom she'yisrael misasvim b'vatei knesiyos u'batei midrashos timoshech lanu kedushas Beis HaMikdash, that we can draw when we get together in a shul, in a Beis Medrash, we can draw the kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash there, because in his case, it wasn't in its place and it came to him. Okay, so that is another example of the connection that happened. Now let's take a look for a second at which tefillah he davened. Okay, the tefillah he davened was Ma'ariv. Avram tiken Shachris. Avram Avinu established Shachris. Yitzchak Mincha, Yaakov Ma'ariv. Okay, so what is the secret of Ma'ariv? So this is the Avnei Nezer of Sachachov. He said, Yaakov Avinu made Ma'ariv so that even people that are in darkness, or in a status of Hester Ponim, of Hashem hiding his face, so to speak, Chas v'Shalom, that he can't feel close to Hashem to daven. He feels that he's locked out. He feels that he's shut out. It's a feeling people have. Nonetheless, he says, if the person knows that he has nobody to turn to but Hashem Yisbarach, and he must daven to him, because there's only one address, like Yonah saw, right? That was the message of Sefer Yonah. There's no place to run from Hashem. You can only run to Hashem. So he says, Al Yedei Zeh Yuchal Iskarev Elov. You can get close to him, even though you don't know how. That gap, I don't feel any closeness now. But you can do it. He says, therefore, this tefillah particularly is called Pigia, right? It's one of the many Lashonos of tefillah. It's one of really pushing and trying, okay? And it means that you're asking for something bli tam klal. You're not arguing. You're not putting forward any claims. You're just saying, please, right? And this is what Chazal said, emes v'yatziv, is what we say in the Shachris. L'hagid baboker chazdecha. That's when we feel the chesed of Hashem. That's when we feel close. V'emunoscha ba'leilos. But at night, that's the time of emunah. At the time where a person doesn't feel it. He feels he's in Hester, but he knows that even the Hester is Litova, he says, so that he can strengthen himself in the darkness. And he says you should know that that has tremendous nachas ruach to Hashem, because he never truly wants to hide from you. He wants you to find him. So he says this tefillah is a very lofty form of tefillah, right? And he says it's a person that comes very purely because he says, I have nothing to say. All I can say is I don't want this distance. I don't want this separation. And therefore he says, Yaakov got the bracha, ufaratzta yamav akedma v'tzafonav anegba. You will spread out in all directions. Nachla b'li mitzarim, they say. The inheritance of Yaakov is a nachla with no boundaries. Because if a person's kavanah is that they want Hashem, they want to be close to Hashem, then he will be assisted in that. Okay, so that again fills the same theme of what's happening.
Is this Begia also Yifka? Is that the same root?
Vayifga, yeah, Vayifga b'makom. Pei gimel ayin, yeah, Begia.
Begia that you just mentioned?
Yeah,
Are
yeah.
those linked?
Correct. So that's because Chazal say that means that he davened there. So just to tie it into Hanukkah, okay? Now, Hanukkah is a unique Yom Tov because it's a Yom Tov, like Chazal said, that wasn't given to be written down, And one parish I saw for that is because the miracle of Hanukkah continues on. The book of Hanukkah, so to speak, is still being written every generation. By Yom Yimahim Bazman Hazeh. And in Hanukkah we find, according to the Ran, right, he says that when we say that phrase, Haneres Halolu Kodesh Heim, Ve'enon Lu Reshus Lishtamesh Be'em Elo L'Rosam Bilvad. It's like, what is that? Something that is Kodesh to the extent that you can't use it for anything else is what we call Hektish. That's like the Kalim of the Beis HaMikdash. Those things have that status. Here I got my little $5 Chanukiah on the windowsill with some colored candles, and you're telling me that's Kodesh? That it can't be used? He says yes. Because with the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, the Chachamim brought the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash to every Jew that lights. No matter where you are, you can put that on the windowsill. The Reb Tzadok, I think, points out that Chanukah and Purim are two Yom Tovim that were designed, but especially Chanukah, because it was in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, that none of its observance has to be in the Beis HaMikdash. It was designed to be portable, that a Jew anywhere, everywhere can fulfill the mitzvah of Chanukah, right, where they are. And here the Sasema says that when they lit back then, it was by a nes. And a nes is above the limitations of nature. As we said, something spiritual has no makom and no zman. So therefore he says, the light of the menorah and the light of Hanukkah shines every time, every place. Why particularly in these times, you'll ask me, he says, if it's above time? He says, no, because certain times are more mukhan, more readily prepared to receive the light from above. He says, since that nes happened at those times, it became a time where you can, so to speak, receive that light. And therefore he says, the lights of the nisim that happened back then happen again. And when we light our Chanukah and their Chanukah, the menorah, wherever it is, because it says that these things were nignaz, the original kalim were hidden. What you see on the Titus's arch in Italy are things from Bayesheni. It's not the menorah that Moshe Rabbeinu made. So therefore he says that lights as well, because that's something which is beyond time. So Hanukkah is particularly unique in a Jew being able to reach to another time, to another place, and to really make it real in his own house. The Rambam says, mitzvah ner Hanukkah, mitzvah chaviva hi ma'od. Very atypical for the Rambam to start giving an emotional description of that, of a particular mitzvah. But these are some of the aspects of it which are there. So hopefully we'll see by Yom Ha'im Bazman Hazeh, like the few, right, overcame the many. Hopefully we should see victories in all ways, and physically and spiritually, and be able to access that light.